This happened when I was about 13 years old. I'm 21 now. This took place at a Walmart in my small Ohio town and involved myself and my friend, Jess, who was about 14. It was a day like any other. It must have been the weekend because I was staying with Jess at the time. Her grandma needed to grocery shop, so we decided to tag along since we didn't have much else to do. The trip there was uneventful and nothing happened when we first arrived. We all walked in together, and as her grandma fetched a shopping cart, we asked her if we could do our own thing. She agreed and said when she finished, she'd have them call us over the intercom to let us know. So we set off to the opposite side of the store from the groceries. We turned down an aisle and started walking toward the back of the store where they keep the electronics and video games. As we walked, we looked down the aisles, just casually checking everything out. To our right, down the aisles a ways, was the toy section. Each time we looked to our right, we had a clear view of all the toy aisles. About 3 to 4 rows down, we looked to the right and saw a middle-aged man standing in the toy aisle, surrounded by 5 little kids. The man looked up at us at the same moment we looked at him. He smiled and waved his hand as if to call us over. Jess and I looked at one another, laughed, and kept walking. We honestly had no red flags going off because we thought he was waving one of his kids over as they were running around the aisle. We continued walking to the back, chatting like we usually would, unaware of any danger. We got to the back and started looking at all the cool cell phones we couldn't afford, looking at video games and all that wonderful stuff. We headed over to the DVD section and noticed a teenage boy, maybe around 16, standing in the middle of the aisle. He looked at us for a second, and I could see the nervousness and fear all over his face. This made me feel weird because I noticed every sideways glance he shot us. Eventually, we grew bored, so we decided to head back toward the front of the store. I think maybe we were heading toward the clothes section. We rounded the corner, and it was either the first or second aisle to our left that we noticed a familiar figure approaching us. It was the man from the toy aisle, but now he was completely alone. Like the last time we spotted him, he smiled and waved us over. I took a quick glance around us, certain he was waving at someone behind us, but nobody was there. Just us. Again, Jess and I looked at each other, laughed, and walked on, making sure to move fast to lose this guy. We still weren't as alarmed as we should have been, but what are the odds we'd run into that guy again? Sure, it was strange that he had, in fact, been waving us over to him, but hey, everything was chill. Need I mention we were naive? I should mention something before going on. Jess and I did this thing back then. Whenever we went somewhere public, we'd pick whatever names we wanted, and that's what we called each other just in case anything like this situation happened. My usual pick was Emily, and normally Jess's was Roxy, but that day she chose Starletta. We got to the clothes section, talking about the guy as we looked around, basically window shopping since we had $0 to our name. We were there for a good 10 minutes, uneventful I might add. We chatted and put the creepy guy out of our thoughts. I'm not sure where we were going next. I just know we were going somewhere when we ran into that guy again. And again, he waved us over, but he seemed much more agitated. This time, we didn't laugh. We turned right around and took off running. We finally realized that this was a dangerous situation, and this guy had nasty intentions. It wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't a game. This was every person's nightmare. I'll be honest when I say I cracked for a minute. I was so scared, but I knew I had to be tough and use my head. At this point, we decided to find Jess's grandma on the opposite side of the store. We chose to go to the front of the store where most people and employees are and make our way to the grocery section where her grandma was. We got to the front and we were walking toward the groceries, past checkout stations and the jewelry section. Just past this, I immediately noticed these 2 dudes, one wearing a hat and the other with his hood up. I don't know what made me notice them, call it intuition. But as soon as I noticed them, they were watching us, and they both immediately looked away when they met my gaze. In that moment, I knew they were watching us for that guy. I watched as the one in the hat got on his phone and put his head down as he spoke silently. Jess and I searched the entire grocery section, which is literally half of the store. No grandma. I was aware that some scary shit was happening and we couldn't find our guardian. Needless to say, we were pretty damn scared. Unsure of what to do, we headed back to Ground Zero, the other side of the store, passing the 2 dudes, hat guy getting on his phone again. We thought maybe her grandma had gone to that side of the store to find us, so we were hoping to run into her. We went down a main aisle instead of the smaller ones and ended up running into a mutual friend, Kel, female. It was nice finding a familiar face. We told Kel about what was happening, and I mentioned the teenage boy we'd seen earlier. Same as the two dudes, I just had a feeling the boy was in on it too. Kel decided to go confront the boy, seeing if he'd spit anything out. Jess and I stayed back, allowing her to approach him alone. After a couple of minutes of them talking, him nervously looking around, his eyes wildly flicking between us, her, and the area, Kel walked back over and said he didn't say much. I guess she asked if he knew where his dad was, to which the boy said he wasn't sure. So basically, it was just a waste of time. We walked away, and I'd say 10 minutes passed when Kel inevitably had to leave. We said our goodbyes and were once again on our own. We headed down an aisle, saw the guy and ran. We got to the main aisle, headed back toward the back of the store, turned the corner, and here he comes, closer than he's been all this time, waving 2 fingers at us, very angrily saying, "Come here." Jess, bless her heart, was so terrified all she could do was meekly whisper, "Hi." I looked at her. "Hi," I said, as I grabbed her shoulders and shoved her back the way we had been coming, and we both took off running. Jess kept running straight, and I took a quick right turn, thinking she'd follow me. She didn't. It was about 30 seconds later that I realized she hadn't followed me. I panicked hard. I whipped around and ran back, more concerned about my friend than running into that man. I went in the direction she had gone, and a few aisles down, I found her. She was standing dead still a few feet ahead, and a few feet ahead of her, moving quickly, was the man. He'd be on her in mere seconds, and in that moment, I couldn't remember the damn name she picked. Don't ask me why our aliases came to mind in such a dire moment, but it only lasted a second. As soon as that thought came, I shouted, "Roxy!" To my utter relief, she whipped right around and ran to me. I grabbed her arm, and we ran as fast and as far as our legs would carry us. We stayed near the center of the store, praying he didn't have any spies nearby. The fear at this point was overwhelming. I'm really shocked neither of us had pissed ourselves. Especially dear Jess. She came close to being close to him. God only knows what that psycho had planned for us. All we knew was that he really wanted us. I remember being so angry that we couldn't find her grandma. We made our way back to the grocery section, and again, no grandma. We were desperate at this point. This chase was getting so tiring, and we were feeling hopeless. We ran into the asshole again and took off running down different aisles. We were stopped by a worker who was scolding us for running, cutting us off every time we tried to plead for help. Jess yelled, "Shut up!" And as the woman prepared to defend herself, I said, "There's a man following us, and we can't find our grandma." This got her attention. Luckily, another employee, a retired cop, overheard and stayed by our side for the rest of this ordeal. The lady went off to look for this guy, and cop dude proceeded to call Jess's grandma over the intercom. We waited about 10 minutes before walking to the front of the store, the lady joining us as we all made our way to the grocery section, passing the 2 dudes, hat guy getting on his phone, wide-eyed. We again couldn't find grandma, so we were walking back to the counter they called her to when here comes the guy, shopping cart, kids and all. We hadn't seen those kids once since we first saw the guy. We immediately pointed him out, and cop dude took us around the corner as the lady approached the man to confront him. A few minutes passed by, and the lady walked back to us. The man walked away, taking one last look, or glare, at us. She said he denied following us, said he was shopping with his kids the whole time. We eventually found Grandma. Turns out she wasn't even in the damn store. She finished her shopping and went out to the car. We ended up leaving, thank God not with that guy. I realize now just how stupid we were and how terrifying this actually was. The scariest part is how orchestrated it all was. People looking out for him on all sides of the store, wherever we went, he'd be there. He really, really wanted us. And I always wonder, were those kids really his, or were they just not lucky enough to get away? When I was 18, I got a job at Walmart, a small town with not much else to offer for someone fresh out of high school. I'd been there for about a month, working in the jewelry department. My shifts usually started in the mid-afternoon and lasted until the department closed at 9 p.m. Although I closed the department by myself, Walmart being a 24-hour store meant there were always other people around. One night, As I was locking the display cases and putting items away, an overnight stalker walked by and greeted me. I looked up, smiled, and returned the greeting before continuing with my tasks. The only way I can describe him is by likening him to one of the Bee Gees. He had shoulder-length, frizzy hair and a bouncy hop to his step when he walked. He was in his mid-50s. This became a regular occurrence. On nights when I closed by myself, he would pass by, say hi, and I would respond in kind. No conversations ever transpired between us. Then, on my birthday, a few of my coworkers got me a cake, and I hugged them and expressed my gratitude. About an hour later, Mr. Bee Gees approached with a birthday card. He handed it to my manager to give to me. My manager found it amusing that this peculiar individual had gotten me a card, until I opened it. Happy birthday. I saw you hugging those guys earlier. It made me really mad, but I called a friend and talked it out. He made me realize, you're allowed to have friends other than me. Just please don't hug them anymore. Save those hugs for me. I'm not sure what emotion was visible on my face, but my manager took the card, read it, and promptly escorted me to the store manager's office. He showed the card to the store manager, who dismissed the message as a joke but promised to have a talk with Mr. Bee Gees. I didn't encounter Mr. Bee Gees for about a week after that. Then, one evening as I was closing, he placed an envelope stuffed with papers on my counter without a word. It contained 6 pages, front and back, of utter chaos. The contents were essentially his life story, delving into his family and schools he attended, but interwoven with bizarre elements. He mentioned his sister being a psychic and his father being an exorcist, among other peculiarities. The letter concluded with a disturbing claim. His 18-month-old friend was missing, and he believed she was being raped because he could hear her screaming his name in his dreams. What on earth? I reported this to the store manager as well, who instructed me to write a formal complaint. He also advised me to avoid going outside alone and to steer clear of areas where Mr. Bee Gees might be during my breaks. It was clear that action needed to be taken. 2 nights later, I was finishing up my tasks for the night. The layout of the counter allowed for a single opening, with counters extending all around on both sides. Mr. Bee Gees brought a hand cart loaded with boxes for my department, but pushed it into the only opening, effectively trapping me inside. He stood there staring at me, while I looked back at him, undoubtedly displaying my terror. I have always been riddled with anxiety, averse to confrontation. The last thing I wanted was for this strange individual to confront me regarding my reports about him. Twice. He whispered, "Sorry, didn't mean to scare ya." I turned away and focused on completing my closing tasks, pretending he wasn't there, even though I could feel his gaze on me. After a few minutes, I mustered the courage to look at him and asked, "Weren't you told to stay away from me?" He responded with a repulsive, predatory grin and said, "The manager asked me if I was joking. I told him I was." He leaned in as close to me as he could, the counter acting as a barrier between us, and whispered, "But I'm not joking." Then he walked away. For the subsequent 2 weeks, he would appear randomly, wherever I happened to be. If I left for lunch, he would be there. Even in non-work settings like the mall, he would somehow be present. Another department manager informed me that 4 other people had reported him over the past 2 years for similar behaviors. I once again approached my store manager, who brushed off the situation, claiming that the guy was harmless and might just have a slight crush. I found it baffling that a man in his 50s would be fixated on an 18-year-old. Fed up, I handed in my notice and quit a week later. Astonishingly, he still works there, 13 years later. His presence still gives me the creeps. At first, I wasn't going to share this story, but now I'm more over the situation. Before we start, judge me all you want, but I know I can be a bit stupid. It's only because I don't like to force myself to live on edge because of the sick people in this world. I live my life as freely and fearlessly as I possibly can. At the time of the story, I was 23. My birthday just passed on the 29th of November, making me 24 now. I'm only 5'2" and about 170 pounds. I'm strong enough to help move furniture, but not strong enough to defend myself the way I would like. You would think that as someone who survived an attempted sexual assault, I would learn some self-defense. But I've lost a lot of motivation and self-worth since. The abusive relationship really made it worse. That's beside the point. So, to start, I won't get into major details. But I had just moved to Jackson, Tennessee from Miami, Florida. because I had just gotten out of an extremely physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive relationship that lasted 3 years. Sometime in June, my current boyfriend and I had been doing trips almost every weekend. We would visit a new hiking and waterfall area. Although there isn't much of a nightlife, Tennessee is amazingly beautiful. We went to this place called Narrows of the Harpeth. This was one of the underwhelming places we've been to, but still relaxing. After we found a cool place to sit and swim after hiking for 2 hours, a few shots, and 1 blunt later, it was time to make the hour trip back to Jackson. I put my shoes on and slipped my dress back on, which is a little bit above the knee length. If I bent too far forward, my little bum would be on display. I own my body and sexuality, so showing some skin never really bothers me, and I don't really think about it because I just expect people to respect me, as I respect them and the way they dress. Anyways, on the way back to the car, I, being the tipsy dumbass I am, managed to trip and fall, scraping my leg pretty badly. It's actually scarred now. Anyways, I tell my boyfriend we need to go to Walmart once back in Jackson so I could thoroughly clean my wound with hydrogen peroxide and Neosporin. My boyfriend says okay. An hour later, we are at Walmart. Mind you, it is only about 9 p.m. going on 10 p.m., not late by any means. We get what I need, but because I am still tipsy and pretty high from the blunt I finished on the car ride home, I get distracted so easily and remembered that my boyfriend got me the wrong size case for my iPhone 11 Pro. He got the Max instead of just the Pro. I wanted an idea of what I could trade it for, and he wanted to look at some of the games as well as a gaming PC for me. So I am happily tipsy and excited to find a new case, which, if you have ever been to Walmart, the cases and are never in order, and often cause you to bend down to look at things. There was a man looking at the cases, and I just said, "Excuse me, sorry, can I look at those cases you're standing in front of?" He just looked at me with a blank yet dirty look, nodded, and stepped over. As I'm happily looking through the shelf about 5 minutes in, this lady and what I assume are her 2 children approach me. Mind you, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and I am thrown off by how close she is to me, especially with her baby that looks no older than 9 months. I step back, and she just grabs my arm and says, "OMG, wow, I haven't seen you in forever. Look at that hair, wow." Her grip tightens. At this point, my heart is racing. My face gets so hot, and I am visibly scared. That's when my boyfriend says, "Everything okay, babe?" He looks at me equally concerned. I am thinking to myself, does this lady know my mom? Who is she? Is she an old family friend I don't remember? Mind you, I'm originally from Ohio. We have family here, but I don't know any of my family that lives in Tennessee. Also, my mom loves to brag about her kids, so I'm trying to shake this weird feeling. But her daughter keeps looking behind me. So I go to turn around, and she goes, "No, don't turn around, walk with me, please, trust me." I don't know why, but I felt she was being genuine, and I just followed her. We step over to the side by the baby clothes, which is still in front of the electronics, and she says, "Baby, I am so sorry to scare you, but there are 3 men surrounding you. They went by the laptops, talked, and then I noticed the guy taking photos and videos of you while you were bent over looking at the cases. The other man was the tall guy next to you, and I don't know where the 3rd man went." All I can remember is this high-pitched ringing in my ears, my stomach flipped, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I never knew what people meant when they say everything slowed down, but in that moment, everything moved in slow motion, and I was freaked out to the point that I have no clue what she said after. It was as if I blacked out for a moment and then quickly came to realize that the family and my boyfriend were looking at me visibly panicked. I turned around, and there he was. He is Hispanic, shorter than me, maybe about 5'1", but he was very much built, also looked to be about 40. The other man, who was white and maybe in his 40s, was about 5'11". I'll never forget the dead blank rage in that Hispanic man's eyes. Like his first meal in 5 days had been stolen from him and he was ready to kill in order to have it back. That's when I saw the white man walk over to him. They said something, both looked at me, looked back at each other, said something else, and started to walk slowly towards us. At that point, we all turned and headed for the registers, and that's when I thanked my lucky stars, because there were about 3 cops at the front of the store. By the time I rudely pushed past people to get to self-checkout, with tears in my eyes and frantically repeating, "Excuse me," to anyone who got in front of me, I looked back and saw them just standing there, but with the 3rd guy this time. My heart sank, and I wanted to pass out at that moment. I guess it looked like I was going up to the cops because they hightailed it once they saw me get close to the cops. Me being high as shit and being a black woman, I wasn't going to chance the cops turning this around on me because I was simply stoned and tipsy. My only thought was, get to the car, get to the gun, don't stop, run. My boyfriend said he could barely keep up with me, and at one point I had grabbed his hand so tight he had to force the grip off because it felt like I was going to crush his hands. And before anyone bashes my boyfriend, I don't expect a man to be my savior. Also, he isn't the angry confrontational type. He is very calm and level-headed. He wouldn't even hurt a fly unless I asked him to get rid of it for whatever reason. I just knew I was the target, and I am putting him at risk. I knew they could easily jump him, and one of them could overpower me after taking him out. I probably looked crazed, half-walking and running past everyone, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to become another missing sister. We made it to the car safely and peeled out of there. I've never seen him drive so fast, as he is beyond careful and would never speed. We sat at a Sonic for about an hour to make sure we weren't being followed. We recounted everything that happened. I just couldn't believe we both were too tipsy to notice that I had become prey in somewhere as simple as a Walmart. I've never felt so stupid and irresponsible in my life. I never want to experience that fear and panic in my life again. I didn't even get the chance to thank the lady who pretty much saved us. Sometimes we talk about it. What if the lady didn't see what that guy was doing? Even if we catch on, there were 3, and we only saw 2 at first. I think of the horrors. That night I had a nightmare that the men attacked us in the parking lot. The creepiest part of the dream was the third man shoved me in the trunk, and as I went to look at his face, all I could see was a featureless face. I woke up in tears that night, realizing I didn't get a clear look at the third guy's face. It took me nearly a month to enter a Walmart again. Since then, I have moved states and have only been to Walmart once since moving here. So to the creepy men that stalked me, upskirted me, and basically followed me even when they knew I was around other people, I genuinely hope we never meet again, because the gun I carry on my purse now has 3 beautiful hollows that would enjoy meeting you all.